When it comes to combiners, scale can be a big issue. Whether or not you want them to match up with your Masterpiece shelf, match up with your Chug shelf, or something in between, we're going to talk about the different scales of combiners and what goes with what. Coming up. So first off, I want to say that this will not be a 100% inclusive list. There's going to be a whole lot of combiners we talk about, a whole lot of companies, a whole lot of scales, a whole lot of sizes, a whole lot of upsizes, and where they all fit, what works together. But it will not be 100% inclusive because that may take an hour. So starting with the smaller size and scale, we did have the Hasbro Combiner Wars. And the reason that we're starting with that one is because a lot of the older, like 10-year-old designs are about that size and about that scale, and they were intended to go along with the Chug. Of course, Chug meaning mainline and Hasbro, and so with that, they fit very well into the Combiner Wars. There are many different combiners that work very well in the Combiner Wars for this scale. So you have the Superion, of course, you have Bruticus, Defensor, you have your Minosaur, but then you get into looking at some of these, and Minosaur was really bad. And so we have a couple of options for a Minosaur in this scale, which we have the Bold Forms Lone Wolf, which came out with a different Motor Master, and you could still connect all the Combiner War limbs to it, and now you can see it looks a lot better. And of course, you could get the Perfect Effect upgrades, and all of these also had upgrades we're going to show here in a second. But this was actually third party's intervention into the Combiner Wars and offering that. But now the price was like $125 for this figure, so you're already dropping close to $100 to get the Combiner Wars version, and then you replace your Motor Master with a $125 figure, which I have to admit, it looks way better. There's many different upgrade kits for the Combiner Wars that make them look better. And here's this Transform Dreamwave, which I never actually handled myself. I had different kits, like the Perfect Effects. But I think a lot of these upgrade kits were there, and it's third parties' first step into getting into creating figures, making Masterpiece, and they do a great job with it. Now, I know Fans Project made a lot of combiners in this scale, and the reason I know that is because I have one, and the funny thing is, these were like $500 or $600 for a set of combiners that were really small, really expensive, and nowadays you can buy them secondhand for maybe $100 or less, like I did. Now, I got a hold of this set simply because I had no other real good Minosaur, and I wanted this one. It's a pretty solid Minosaur, it looks decent. But I think all of the big options that are coming are going to blow this out of the water. But it's still fun to have, and it's still fun to go back and see, what we had 10 years ago. Fans Project also had a Bruticus, which looks great. I mean, it's an amazing looking Bruticus. And it looks good side by side with their Minosaur. I felt like it was a little bit shorter. And one thing that gets confusing is when you start reading heights, or how tall is this? Well, they measure it to the tallest point of the figure, which I guess are the barrels on this one. This thing is not even as tall as their Minosaur, and the Minosaur only measures about 11 or 12 inches, depending on what point you take the top of the head. And I really think combiners, it's the top of the head that needs to be the measurement, not the top of whatever extremity. But that's just my personal belief. Combiner Wars also made a good Computron, and I think it's a pretty decent bot. Of course, it shares a lot of engineering with the Superion, and Superion was a good bot, so there's always that. And I'm not going to get into all of the G2 repaints and all of that stuff, but this is the baseline, smallest level. Let's move to the next level. So next up we have the 14 to 16 inch range, which kind of would go together really well. That would include some of the Warbotron. So Warbotron so far has the best looking Computron out, and they had a good looking version of Bruticus, and those scale in the 14 to 16 inch range, and they looked good, and I felt like they were still a bit small personally, but a lot of people love these, and we're going to see they get oversized. But let's look at some other items and figures that go along with it. Now, Transformissions Havoc is supposed to be within that scale according to the information. I actually don't have this figure in hand, but I think it looks good, and so far it is the biggest version of a Minosaur that's out right now, and it looks okay. It's a bit stylized. They were going for stylized, and so we've got 4 more options of Minosaur coming that are more G1 than this, but I think that this is the best looking one out right now. Next up in this range, we have the Unique Toys, and Unique Toys made a Ragnaros, which is a pretty good looking figure. Now, there is some discussion on whether you would count this Ragnaros as like a 15-inch figure, or if you would count it as a 17-inch figure. So, I mean, that's really going to be up to you based on where his head is, or if you're looking at the top of his arms and all that. So, I classify him in this scale because of where the top of the head is, and I've seen it in person. It's a nice looking figure. They also have their Orden or Abominus, and it's a good looking figure too. But, you know, both of those to me are a bit on the small side, and if you're okay with that, if that's the scale you're going in, then that'll work. So next in this range with the 14 to 16 inch is TFC. Now TFC has made quite a few figures. They've made their Hercules, which is their Devastator. They've made a Superion Uranus. They've made Poseidon, a Defensor. And they've also made, Defensor is Prometheus. And Poseidon is a whole different figure. Now, Poseidon really presses the limits of the tall end of this. And it's a good looking figure, actually. And getting back to it, these are all $500 to $600 figures back in the day, which now I don't know if they're going to be going for those prices. But seeing how there's no one really rivaling this, online sites are still asking $600 for this guy. So till another one comes out, you know, we're going to be dealing with some really high prices on some smaller than acceptable figures. Now, Generation Toy falls into this with their Gravity Builder for their Devastator and their Guardian for their Defensor. And I want to say that the Defensor is looking good. And this one's still in the works. It's not even all the way done. But yet it is still too small for me for Masterpiece. But these both work fine for Chug. Now, you're going to see, we're going to get into some KO oversizing and talk about them here in just a bit. So getting into the next scale, we're looking at the 17 to 18 inch range. And I think this is the first true Masterpiece scale. Like, you could put these on your Masterpiece shelf next to Masterpiece figures, aesthetically pretty close, size-wise, they're there. I think 18 inches is a good size. And Hasbro ushered it in with their Titan class figures. And the Titan class Devastator and Titan class Predaking, I think they look good. I think they have the size. I think they have the presence on the shelf to work as Masterpiece. But a lot of people disagree with me. They both require some upgrade kits to make them, you know, another step closer to Masterpiece. Now, MMC is working on their Assaultus, which is going to be their version of their Bruticus, and I think it looks good, and kind of versus the Unique Toys and versus what we're going to see with Zeta. It's a good looking figure. It's a little short, and since it's all inclusive, it's not quite as clean and smooth as you would get, but the arms look really good. I mean, actually, it's a pretty clean, smooth figure for being all. It's impressive. I just wished it was a little bigger, and it's very pricey. Also hinted at a Defensor, which would be awesome, but still wouldn't be quite big enough to go into the next step. So this scale lends itself very well for the Jinbao KO oversizes, and I had the Bruticus myself, and it's based off Warbotron, and it looked good. I thought it was a good figure. It was a bit fiddly and kind of hard to stand and not quite sturdy, but it looked good. It looked okay. It was highly detailed line work, but I like mine a little smoother than that. And then also we have the Jinbao K oversized Feral Rex, which, you know, some people just love this thing and it's huge. But to the top of the head, it really only matches up with Devastator, I guess. Now, there is the TFC Toys K oversized version of the Uranus. And now that is actually a figure that would fit in this scale almost, and I think it would pass. I don't think it's short enough to be in the other scale, so it's kind of in between scales in a way, but yeah, that would work. And we have the KO oversize of Gravity Builder, and this is the Devastator that so many people are really excited about. There are upgrades to make this thing even bigger, and as you can see with the grade parts in this picture, those are upgrade pieces to add extensions to the knees to make it taller, a bigger head, a more Toon or G1 accurate head. And so they're really trying to compete with Toy World with all these extra pieces and build this thing up. And we're talking for like $180, you're having a figure that is almost the size of Toy World now. But the KO oversized Jin Bao version would literally just match up to the Combiner Wars version. And some people try to say the Unique Toys Ragnaros would fall into this. And if you're looking at the height of total height, I guess it would work. And so that's why this one's stuck in between two scales itself too. But the one thing that really shocks me is how nobody, Jin Bao or Wei Zhang, and none of them have KO oversized any Computron. And nobody's working on a Computron in any big size. I don't get it. Alright, so let's get into what everybody really cares about the most, is modern day, larger than life, masterpiece versions of Combiners. And it really all started, it was ushered in by Toy World. And Toy World made their Devastator, and they made their Devastator in 15 different colors. Each color is transparent, and each color has 3 different shades. So there are 47 different combinations of... Now, I really don't know, I didn't keep up with it, but it seems crazy. But it is the quintessential defining Devastator so far. And it didn't even try to go for G1. They added G1 parts later, going, oh, well, let's make it look more G1 because that's what people really want. So, designers that were heavily influenced with the Toy World aesthetic and the Toy World build split off from Toy World and became Zeta. Now, big difference between the build from Toy World to Zeta is a Toy World is way heavier than a Zeta figure. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. And they did use very, very similar waist piece. But with Zeta, they went one step further, and you can almost build the figure without your actual leader figure in it, which was goofy and silly, but ingenious at the same time. So these figures are much bigger. They're like 20 inches plus. You know, they're a little, depending on if you're measuring the head and the tips of the whatever. From the head, they're 20 inches. Now everybody wants a piece of Zeta's action, and we have the likes of X-Transbots and DX9 and Fans Toys and Rising Force we'll talk about later. But let's look at DX9 and X-Transbots. Those are the first two, which should be the first two done, by the way. And this December we should have X-Transbots finished. The thing is, all of these, every one of these, is going to be taking the Zeta formula and it's going to be Zeta Combiner Pieces Plus. They are going to maximize parts forming to the extreme level that we've never seen ever. Now, I'm going to put that on record. This is parts forming plus right here. And I don't care one bit. If it gives me the aesthetic of the figure that I want, it gives me the articulation, it gives me the stability, it gives me everything I want, I don't care. Give me 97% parts forming. I'll take it. But they look good. And I don't know, it's kind of hard not to be in on all of them. And I have to say, I like the size of the individual bots for Fans Toys and DX9 better than X-Transbots. But I don't care because I know for a fact I'm going to put X-Transbots in combined mode, but X-Transbots combined mode is the smaller section. It's the smaller, lower level of this combiner masterpiece scale that is the new scale. It will be significantly smaller next to a Fans Toys or a Zeta, but not DX9. DX9 it's like 1 centimeter difference. It's like a 0.4 of an inch. So when Fans Toys entered this race, and I already talked about this whole rivalry between Fans Toys and X-Transbots and entering this race, and then I'm sure Fans Toys has a bone to pick with DX9 and all that great stuff. But when you look at this, these figures do really look good, but a lot of people say over and over that X-Transbots actually is more toon accurate. Now, when it releases, I'll go through hours of footage and find multiple different shots and show you the differences in shots, but it's all up to you in the end. What do you like the aesthetic of? How tall are they? How tall do you want them to be? But Fans Toys allegedly gives you options for multiple different display options, whether you put the cars on the front of the legs or the back of the legs. There's a bunch of differences, but in the end, I don't ever plan to have any of my Fans Toys built as combiners, ever. I'm buying them for individual bots because that's where they shine, and I don't really think any of the other combiners shine individual bots, except DX9, which they look good too, but maybe I'm just crazy in my head. But anyway, I think that this X-Transbots one looks good in combined mode, and it'll be first, and we're gonna see. Now, if Rising Force comes out with theirs still, with all the heavy competition, all the battling it out, and all of the spent money on other combiner sets, they've got to put it out at a really low price to attract the people who have not bought a set at all, to attract the people who already bought a set and just said, hey, I'll just buy this one for fun. 200 is the max for their whole set, I think, and if they did it, it would sell very well. Now, there's a couple more questions to be asked. Which company's going to make a Computron, and which company's going to make a Defensor? That's all just one question, by the way. And these figures need to get made. I am really getting sick of multiple companies fighting over one character. I understand why, because they feel it's more popular. But if other companies or these companies fighting over Menasor would split off and make different figures, they would all sell very well, instead of fighting each other and each trying to take one section of that same pie. The last question is, what about KO oversize of Hasbro's? If they upsize them big enough, would they work in Masterpiece? A lot of people say yes, a lot of people say no. I want to hear where you stand. Let me know what you think about this whole Combiner Wars, this whole Combiner Masterpiece War. Like, subscribe to Darehammer Hanger out.